Shalom. I'm Tony Two-Tone and welcome to my new series, Is It Better Than? I was in need of a little break from my videos about the top 100 RPGs and wanted to focus on newer releases. And whether you like it or not, sequels, spin-offs, etc. are the meta for what comes out nowadays. So I thought comparing these newer releases to their previous ones is a good way of revisiting some classics while simultaneously getting a chance to play new games. How long will this series last? No fucking clue. But I like the idea, so here we are. 2025 has been off to a pretty great start. We've got some new games, contenders for Album of the Year already, and personally, I got a new tattoo, so I could not be happier with this start. One of these new releases was Avowed, the long-awaited spin-off slash sequel-ish, kinda, maybe, to Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. Avowed was announced roughly a gajillion fucking years ago, in the distant time of 2020, a year of downs and, oh yeah, even more downs. When this game was released, I remember the Pillars community being split. Half of them coping about, why no Pillars of Eternity 3? Even though Deadfire sold roughly negative fucking 40,000 copies, another half being tentatively optimistic about exploring a Pillar-set world in first person. To get this out of the way, I'm a huge fan of Pillars of Eternity, and CRPGs in general, so while I also would have preferred a new Pillars game, I was open to this new direction. There has been one studio to nail the leap from CRPG to first-person RPG, and that would be Obsidian with Fallout New Vegas. So I trusted that Pillars would be in good hands with this change. Then the trailer dropped. Ooh, Skyrim! Ooh, it's like Skyrim! Fast forward to late last year, 2024, where a couple of pre-release things made me cock the old eyebrow. Pushback for release, pre-order trailer for Premium Edition, which included a pack of gum and about 6 cigarettes, and that $70 price tag. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear, this is not a should you buy type video. I have faith that we are all big boys, girls, theys, and gays here, and can determine for ourselves if what you see makes the price tag acceptable. Plus, there are about infinity other reviews that you can base your decision on. That's not what this video is for. Instead, I will compare Deadfire to Avowed in terms of story, presentation, progression, combat, and companions. My usual way of breaking down RPGs. At the very end, I will be giving each a letter grade and sliding them into my ever-expanding RPG tier list, which ranks every RPG I've played on this channel in order of enjoyment. One other thing is there will be spoilers galore, and I won't warn you when it's coming because frankly the entire thing is going to be an in-depth talk about each game, so of course I will have to go into detail, so take this as an overall spoiler warning. On a final note for this intro, I want to make it abundantly clear that all art is subjective. No letter grade can encapsulate personal experience. Just because I did or did not like something doesn't mean that it is or isn't good. Enough fucking around. Let's get started. Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. Deadfire is a CRPG released in 2018 for the PC and was developed by iconic studio Obsidian Entertainment. Deadfire released to, well, let's just say lackluster reception. Critics ate this shit up, but something just didn't seem to resonate with the general audience who loved Pillars of Eternity, but this one underperformed. It is to my understanding that eventually Deadfire became profitable, but this was too little too late as that was kind of seen as the final nail in the coffin for the Pillars of Eternity franchise. That was until Avowed and its success, which has rekindled conversations about a potential third entry, but that's neither here nor there, nor any fucking where. We're talking about Deadfire. To be transparent, I've played Deadfire many a time before, so of course this is not going to be completely objective. I have my own biases, but I will attempt to be as fair and critical as I see fit. So, with that out of the way, let's jump into the story. Jeepers creepers, where do I even begin? Deadfire is a direct sequel to the first Pillars of Eternity and is set roughly 5 years after the events of the previous game. We start off with our castle being squished like a little bug by the gigantic god statue Aethys, who has arisen from the basement of your castle and has torn off into the lands of Deadfire, sucking souls, and not the good kind of suck, out from bodies of all kith, the human-like species. Your character, the Watcher, is one of the people who got sucked dry like a delicioso Capri Sun and left to die. You somehow hang on and are contacted by the god of death Bareth and tasked to chase after the god Aethys to try to find out why he is destroying village after village, soul after soul, and most importantly, where he is headed. That is the overall gist of it, and if I went into full detail, we would be here all fucking day. So now let me talk about what I like about the story. I really enjoy the faction's approach to this entire tale. This is not uncommon for Obsidian, but it is done extremely well here. The 4 factions vying for our support and for control of the Deadfire region are the Principi, the Pirates, the Valian Trading Company, the Italians, hey, I'm fucking a doing here, huh? The Huana, the native tribe of the region, and the Rauataians, previous tribe that got expelled from Deadfire and are now mega imperialist nation. Each faction has its own leader, and every single one of them is manipulative and scheming, but also somehow super charming and charismatic. The web of politics that gets spun from these groups is masterful, and it's the best aspect of this game. Within all these groups, there's interpersonal relations, there's internal conflicts, and genuinely enough lore to make your fucking head spin. The Principi fighting between the 2 internal factions, one which strives for order and criminal enterprise, and the younger group that wants nothing more than to live an anarchical, free-spirited, true pirate life. With the VTC, you have a love of art and science, backed by a greed that yearns to acquire Deadfire through legal disputes and contracts, a more pencil-pushing form of imperialism. Oh, we love it as science and maybe a little bit of slavery too. You have the Rauataians, who are military-minded with a might-makes-right attitude, but they're also a Mawa and have some claim to the Deadfire. Plus, their homeland is starting to dissipate, leaving them desperate to expand. Finally, the Huana, who are the natives to this region and have most claim to it, but also have very outdated societal hierarchy and are gullible to a fault. It's so intriguing to learn about each group and discern for yourself which faction is the worthiest of your support, and somehow it's still a genuine toss-up. Each group has their own interests, which sometimes align with the just morality and sometimes don't. I think the best overarching moral conflict in Deadfire is between the Rauataians and the Huana. It would be so easy for this game to approach a conflict like this and go, colonialism, evil, Huana, right. But it's not that black and white. Making the imperialist force come from the same ancestors as the natives creates such a complicated dynamic. The caste system of the Huana is fucked, and they could care less about the poorest in their tribe. But the Rauatai are so military-brained that they would rather scheme and plot assassinations rather than accept some kind of deal between the two. It's a morally gray situation, and both sides can be right for the wrong reasons, and I love this about them. It's so refreshing to see a conflict like this addressed in a more mature, realistic way than the simple good and evil lens this theme is usually portrayed with, and I love it for it. I also love how in these quests, they will directly call you out for trying to toe the line on these complicated issues. If you chime in with some dumb shit like, "Can't we all get along?" they go, "Thanks fucking Socrates, any other mind-shattering ideas you want to propose?" Also, did I mention all of these factions are pretty much side content? So much depth and world building built into optional faction quests. It's things like this that make me love this story. I also love the gods that appear throughout the story and which you can converse with. Their lore is so enthralling to learn about, and I was chomping at the bit to see more interactions between my character and these various gods. I think my overall favorite is Rimmergant, who gets his own DLC, which is just the cherry on top, but they're all interesting and memorable in their own way. Speaking of gods, let's talk about the villain? Sort of? Aethys. Spoilers upcoming, so skip ahead to the next section if you don't want this game spoiled. I know I already warned you, but I'm super serious this time. I love Aethys as a character. We have known since the first game that the gods aren't actually like gods as we gamers know them, but rather beings created from a previous civilization. Aethys is under the belief that humans are better off without these entities fiddling around with their own existence, and so he has decided to take matters into his own hand. This results in the destruction of the wheel, or rather the mechanism in charge of maintaining the cycle of life. Every interaction we have with him is fantastic, as he portrays this sorrowful figure who genuinely seems aware of the despair that he has been causing, but believes it's all for a greater good if it means getting rid of the bickering gods who meddle and destroy mortal lives all of the time. I also love the respect he shows for your character and their opinions, as he is one of the few gods that does see regular Kith as beings worthy of attention and listening to. Another aspect I love about the story is kind of the free-carrying exploration of it all with this tinge of despair and hopelessness. From your first encounter with Aethys, it is abundantly clear there's jack shit you can do to stop this skyscraper-high Dr. Manhattan lookalike. Your only hope is to follow him and maybe talk him down, but there is not a chance in hell you can fight him. It adds to the stakes of the circumstances and reinforces the sheer threat that gods serve as, thus kind of reinforcing Aethys' point. My only real complaint with the story is how much quality faction quests there are to do while a giant wrecking ball destroys Deadfire. But it's the classic conundrum of balancing world-ending stakes while fleshing out the video game world, and this is not the first nor the last game to improperly balance these two aspects. The Witcher 3, and I did dislike the abrupt cliffhanger ending, but it's pretty apparent this was meant to be the second installment in a trilogy. Just sucks that we never got to complete that trilogy. Now let's compare it to the other game, Avowed. Avowed is a first-person, or third if you're a fucking freak, action RPG developed by, take a guess, that's right, Obsidian, and released in 2025. A couple of weeks ago? Avowed released to mixed reviews, we'll say. Most of the creators I enjoy watching on YouTube fucking hated this thing, but audiences seem to genuinely enjoy it, and it's gotten pretty good reviews from most gaming journals and outlets, so the jury truly is out when it comes to reception. Avowed was directed by Pillar's veteran Carrie Patel, one of the main writers of Deadfire, so I remained optimistic about this game's potential despite raging debate on whether this game is good or not. It's important to note when comparing these two games that I am comparing Deadfire, a completely finished game that has had numerous DLC, updates, and even slight story alterations to fill in plot holes, to a relatively fresh Avowed, so do keep that in the back of your minds. Let's tackle the story. Gnocchi, you cannot come up here. Sit on the bed. Sit on the bed. Oh my god, he's a furry little freak. In Avowed, you play as the Envoy, an endearing and godlike diplomat sent into the living lands to investigate a mysterious plague known as the Dream Scourge, which causes creatures to mutate into fungal abominations or just straight up die. Godlikes are Kith who have been granted unique features by their gods, who have metaphorically and metaphysically touched them, endowing them with these gifts or curses depending on who you ask. On your way to the living lands, your ship wrecks and you are left without a crew, all on your own to solve this mysterious crisis and get to the bottom of what's going on here. During your travels, a mysterious voice starts speaking to you in your dreams and at random moments throughout your playthrough, so it's on you and your newly acquired companions to figure out what the actual fuck is going on. First, let's talk about the things I like. Since this is a more popular format of video game, I kind of just naturally assumed a lot of the Pillar's lore would be rudimentary or not referenced, and boy fucking howdy was I wrong. This goes super hard and deep into the lore of this universe, which as a Pillar's vet, I am all for. But I can understand new players who saw videos and went, oh, Skyrim! Skyrim, Mom, Skyrim! And felt way out of the loop. If I came into this game not having played Pillars of Eternity 1 or 2, my ass would have been delving in that glossary, and I can't say whether or not I'd enjoy that. But Deadfire was also pretty lore heavy, so I think it would have been fine. There are also some pretty cool story elements and story beats dispersed throughout the runtime. Happening to stumble across the cave where the Steel Garrote was planning their attack was such an amazing moment because A, it's cool that this is really easy to miss and has pretty substantial rippling effects based on if you did or didn't stop this assault, and B, it's a prime example of Avowed taking advantage of its best attribute, the exploration, and implementing a story beat like this which rewards the players that's thoroughly engaging with exploration. This element plays to its strengths perfectly, and I would have loved to see more ideas like this incorporated. My final huge positive is the villain. No exaggeration, I think Ludwin is the best villain the Pillars universe has to offer. Easily surpasses Tao. It's been a while since I played Pillars of Eternity 1, the main villain of Pillars of Eternity 1, and technically Aethys isn't really a villain, so Ludwin is just better. The way you can establish the relationship your envoy has with Ludwin is such a fun creative approach to take for a villain. She can be a bitchy boss, your longtime mentor, or former lover, and these all fit with her established character. I chose lover after she became undead because I thought this was a really funny premise, and it actually was kind of endearing. You just know sex with Ludwin sounds like the Minecraft skeleton sound effect. Moving on, every scene she is in immediately becomes 10 times better, and she's not completely a one-dimensional character. Her genuinely having the best interests of the citizens during the ruin scene shows off layers to her, and hearing about her feats throughout the living lands and interacting with her just makes her that much more larger than life. Her design is imposing and fantastic, and I just loved everything about her character, including the final confrontation, which might be my favorite fight in the game. Even if I did fucking steamroll her and knock the bush off her skeletussy, wiped my mushroom ball sweat all over that fight, just annihilated her. But she's a really great villain and one of my favorite parts of this story. Now on to what I didn't like, and unfortunately it's quite the long list. Number 1 is just the plot. I really was disinterested in pursuing quests at all in this game. Side quests felt boring as all hell, and all the ones that were semi-interesting were only because they led to a new fun and unique zone, like the mining mission or the temple one. The main plotline felt relatively bland, and I think this is largely due to Sopadal. In case you're unaware, Sopadal is a god no one knew about, and the god that granted you your godlike features and capabilities. I talked about how much I love the gods in Deadfire, and for all of those reasons, I hate Sopadal. She's just this mysterious, mystical being who speaks in riddles and vague generalities, and it's so boring and uninteresting to sit through. Every other god in Pillar's lore is interesting and filled with personality. The psychotic nature of Whale, the snakish, venomous approach of Skane, the icy, Irish, uncaring demeanor of Rimmergand, bury the boy, or the arrogant, domineering voice of Wodica. They all rock. Sopadal is a fucking wet paper bag of personality, just nothing there. The godless civilization is cool, and the beef with Wodica and Sopadal is kind of interesting, but not enough to make up for the lack of story widely throughout the game. Also, I know this game has been in development for a long time, so it might not be copying, but that ethereal, unknown voice speaking to you through your dreams is so Baldur's Gate 3 coded, it's not even funny. But at least with Baldur's Gate 3, it took it someplace that was interesting with the Emperor. This one was so monotonous in the quote-unquote twist you could see coming from a mile away. Sopadal is responsible for the Dream Scourge. Oh, yeah, and also the fucking sky is blue. Finally, maybe the most frustrating contention I have with this story is the quote-unquote moral quandaries throughout the game. These feel deep on surface level, but when you dissect them, they fall apart. Let's take the Ruins choice, for example. The Dream Scourge have taken over a priceless archaeological temple, and your choices are to side with Lodwyn and burn the temple to prevent the spread, or side with the Arch-Magi Ringrim and use the essence of the people on the island to try to purge the Dream Scourge. How many people do we have to sacrifice to choose this option? Oh, I don't know, anywhere between like a couple dozen to half the population? Brother, what is the point of curing the Dream Scourge if there's no one left alive to catch the fucking thing? It's such a dumb decision that makes no sense. Why half the population? I feel like a better alternative would be to require all the nature to wilt and all vegetation to be sacrificed, which might lead to chaos and starvation for the population. But in return, you could save them from the Dream Scourge. Why not something like this that makes the choice tough? I feel like the game's reasoning is that burning the temple is just as bad because it's a priceless artifact, but who gives a fuck? Also, companions' reactions freaking peeved me. I'll go more in depth in the companion section, but a lot of the time their reactions just didn't make sense with what we knew previously about them. It seemed like the writers just needed a different viewpoint in some circumstances, so they made companions act super out of character, like Kai during the Solus mission choice. I also felt frustrated because it seemed like there were many points in the game where dialogue choices didn't match at all what I was feeling. So many times my justifications of why I made certain decisions just were never reflected in dialogue, and it caused me to feel super detached from the game in these moments because I couldn't state what felt plainly obvious. I can't recall this happening a single time in Deadfire, where even if I made a decision I later regretted, dialogue options usually always had some sort of reflection of how I felt or why my characters did what they did. That's another thing. Pretty much every outcome in Avowed ends in one of two ways that's plainly laid out for you. I'm fine with this on occasion, but it's like every main questline that has a quote-unquote moral quandary. Do this and this happens, or do that and that happens. 50-50. That's all of these choices. I think I'm just about out of stuff to say about Avowed's story. So, which story is better? Deadfire or Avowed? As much as I shat on Avowed, I do want to emphasize the magic of Pillars is here. It will poke its head out occasionally to remind you that this universe is complicated and morally challenging. But like that fat fuck Puxatani Phil, it's about once a year, and that's what sucks. With iteration, I think Avowed's story could go cool places, but with what we have, Deadfire wins by about a mile. I feel like the primary motivating factor progressing through the game in Deadfire was the story and the factions and the world. In Avowed, it's the exploration and combat, while the story unfortunately just feels like it falls to the wayside. I gotta give this one to Deadfire. Next, we move on to presentation. For CRPG standards, Deadfire is fucking creme de la creme, a cream of the crop. Do keep in mind this is a CRPG, we're not looking at AAA graphics. Here we're looking at little 3D avatars, roaming environments we're viewing from 100 feet in the fucking sky. I love it. The character designs are okay. Nothing fantastic or stand out, but they get the job done well enough and feel unique. Character creation when it comes to design is meh. The godlike are really cool, and I like Amawa options, but it all feels limited and suffers from the CRPG curse of never matching the goddamn portrait. But for the most part, you won't really see them all that much under their armor, so I don't think this aspect is super important. And hear ye, the armor can look so fucking cool. There's a pretty obscene amount of armor to pick through and choose in this game, and I liked pretty much all of the designs. Environments in this game also look beautiful. There are so many gorgeous backgrounds and set pieces to get lost in, and they all feel widely varied. I remember Pillars 1 suffering a little bit from too many inside dungeon areas and whatnot, but Deadfire has an amazing array of varied locations, all with their own distinct feel. I also really enjoyed the sort of like summer vibe this game gives off. Sailing with your crew, singing sea shanties while you explore the boundless sea is so much fun and sucks you into the life of a sea captain. Speaking of shanties, the soundtrack for this game is the most underrated RPG soundtrack, maybe of all time. Every piece is gorgeous, every piece is memorable, and it all feels like it fits the tone and atmosphere of the game without ever just coming off as background noise. Beautiful string sections intertwined with weird horn themes all felt right. I was listening to the soundtrack in the background while I wrote this, and every time a new song came on, I immediately recognized what part of the game it comes from, and that's no small feat. I'm an idiot. I forget things easily. I really cannot say enough good things about Deadfire's soundtrack. From soundtrack, we move to sound design. Hits and attacks feel so heavy and visceral. Hearing the sound of my character fucking punching a creature's nose into its cranium is just... Enemy designs are also great. There's a good variety to the enemies you'll fight, and some of their models are so awesome to look at, especially bosses and larger enemies, including things like the Kraken, the dragons, and especially the multiple DLC bosses, which all knocked my socks off. The only enemy that slightly got old was the random pirates on ship battles, but I mean, how many fucking ways can you make a pirate, you know? Speaking of which, I love the piratey aesthetic. There's just not that many games that go for this feel, except for like maybe Wind Waker, Black Flag, Yakuza Like a Pirate, Skies of Arcadia, Sea of Thieves, Skull and Bones. Okay, maybe there's quite a bit, but not that many CRPGs. Except for that one part in Baldur's Gate 2. Okay, maybe not wholly original, but I still liked it. Animations are also done extremely well. The flash of spells going off looks so crisp, or the variety of environmental druid spells looks so great in this game, and this look mixed with the sound design makes these attacks feel weighty. Same goes for melee abilities. I think Pillars might have my favorite implementation of a monk class in an RPG, due entirely to the cool animations and visceral thuds that occur when attacks land. It's so much fun to play through, and it helps accentuate the combat system. My only real complaints for presentation in this game is probably the menu screens. Inventory management is a fucking nightmare to deal with. It's damn near impossible to navigate through, and it's unfortunately much easier to lose an item in this bitch than you would expect. Also, I don't agree with the next criticism, but I can understand people's complaints at the tone of this game's visual style. If you're not down for a little Johnny Deppin', I can understand not gelling with these bright, saturated environments, especially considering this game comes from Pillars 1. A much darker game than this, but I think the variety of locations more than make up for the loss of the darker tone that the first game had. Especially considering the tone of the story still matches that original dreary feel of Pillars of Eternity 1. Now on to Avowed. Holy shit, guys. I am so happy to announce that this game is visually stunning. It's been a long time since I played a game where I stopped so many times to just soak in my surroundings. Vista after vista, I would stop, pop my camera view to third person, and just scan the horizon. I cannot overstate how gorgeous this game is. I also love the locations throughout. This game might unironically have my favorite desert zone in any RPG I've ever played. It's that good. Hold on, just go scratch my titty real quick. Oh, this fat bastard's getting old. Whew. The saturated hues of orange and red in the sand takes me back to my college spring break road trip to the Arches National Park in Utah. And this entire area felt like the different biomes of the American Southwest. It looked phenomenal. Also have to shout out the beautiful snowy region, the classic lava caves, and the coastal shores of the first area. So many detailed, well thought out map layouts led to an enjoyment of exploration I have not felt in a long while. I would fucking forget I was even a part of the story because I just wanted to spend all my time going from spot to spot throughout the map and exploring every chance I got. The exploration is absolutely the bread and butter of this game. When it was first announced, I thought parkour would kind of be goofy to add to a Pillars of Eternity game, but I can proudly admit I was completely wrong. It felt really good, and you could tell quite a bit of thought went into how each level could be implemented vertically as well as horizontally, and it adds a depth to locations that can be unexpected. I also thought NPCs, for the most part, looked really good. Orlins looked great, dwarves looked amazing, and elves/humans looked eh. Some were great, but some were a little sketchy. The best looking NPCs were without a doubt the Amawa. The way they presented the scale-like skin and shark aesthetic in a more detailed up-close model looked so good. It just dug the knife in deeper that you couldn't play as an Amawa, but oh fucking well, I guess. Speaking of character looks, let's talk about character creation. I think it's a little overhated. I thought it was decent. I do agree that humans and elves should not have been the only races, but I don't mind forcing the player to be a godlike. In fact, if you're gonna limit the race of the player, a godlike is the way to go for pillars. They just straight up kind of fuck the accentuations. They all just seem like weird tack-ons, rather than well thought out implementations of fungal features into a person. Now, I do want to remind the viewer that pillars also was bad, but just in a different way. Their godlikes were way cooler, but you could only choose from like 3 faces. If Avowed would have focused on implementing the god's design into the model, it would have gone a lot smoother, but there would have been so many less choices. That's just how it goes. Even though I can empathize with the idea that godlike features look like tacked on accessories, they kind of have to be if you're going to give the player the freedom to change the rest of the facial features like nose, lips, eyes, and mouth. I was able to make a freaky godlike that I enjoyed who was a good mix of sex magnet with Clicker from The Last of Us, but if you're opposed to making a fucking heathen of a main character, I can understand being a little upset at the choices. Especially considering how cool godlike look in the Pillars universe. Look what the demon rat sticker must, my sexy moon goddess is gone. The animations, whether it be spell or melee, are fantastic. I sincerely think first person is the way to go, and every attack animation is so fucking cool. I'm running out of adjectives here, but god damn it, it's cool. Reloading an arquebus, casting a spell, shooting ice out of your hands, lunging with a sword, it all looks and feels great, especially when combined with the sound design, which is just about as good as Deadfire's when it comes to oomph. The drip you can find is kind of eh. Like some of it is cool, but a lot of the endgame equipment looked iffy. Luckily you can transmogrify, so you can change it up quite a bit, but still, it didn't look quite as cool as Pillars equipment normally does. Enemy designs look great in my opinion, they just definitely reuse them far too often. Don't get me wrong, boss's look and designs were A+ Wagyu steak, but god damn it do they know it. Like the amazing fungal bear in the first zone, hope you're ready to fight him 80 more fucking times throughout. Oh, also hope your fucking ass loves skeletons. Unfortunately, I have to end this section on a negative note. The music in Avowed felt so unbelievably mid. If you told me I had to hum a single melody from this game or walk the plank, ya boy would be swimming with the fishes. This especially hurts because it's Pillars. It's kind of known for having great soundtracks, but this was definitely not one of them. So, who wins the presentation bout? This one's hard because there's such different games going for such different things. However, I did say I would do my best to be objective. And objectively speaking, I do think Avowed clears. I mean, it just looks so good, it's a tough one to beat. This one's going to Avowed. Next up is progression. Let's start off at the very beginning for Deadfire. First, you can either import a save from Pillars of Eternity 1, or go through the task of creating a save state, which accounts for a pretty obscene amount of variation. From here, you choose your race, class, stats, culture, occupation, weapon proficiency, and various character customization choices. I roleplayed as an Amawin from Rautai, who was a Naupazka monk. This is a monk who gains a major boost from being under the influence of drugs. pretty much an ogre who does psychedelics and punches people in the face. Now that I'm thinking about it, I fucking roleplayed Joe Rogan. On a serious note, Amawa have got to be my favorite race in a fantastical universe. Grabbing from Native American culture is not anything new in fantasy, but the Pacific Islander culture is a beautiful inspiration, and I love how the shark-like appearance and scales helps mesh with the island/coastal lifestyle of the Amawa. But, back to progression. I fucking adore this progression system. The amount of variation in classes and multi-classes is so well done. At the beginning, you can choose a single class or multi-class, and every single multi-class has a dedicated name and progression tree. Multi-classes benefit from being able to pick between two different trees on level up, but lose out on high-level abilities that single classes are privy to. Every single multi-class is genuinely viable. It's insane. Sure, they say that about D&D, but let's be honest, not really. There are wrong choices to make that don't mesh well. This system seems like it was designed for every single class to gel with one another, and this is in big thanks to the stats which aren't like other D&D stats. Things like might that normally affect aspects like strength in typical tabletop role-playing games don't apply the same way in Pillars. Here, might is just damage, regardless of class, so might can be just as important to wizards as it is to warriors, and the same is similar for every other stat. It's such a smart way of innovating upon typical RPG systems. Also, Pillars is some of my favorite classes of any RPG. Druids and Pillars are great, especially with the variety of wild forms and the really fun array of spells. Ciphers are a fun take on warlocks that implement Pillars lore into their design, and my overall favorite class is Chanter. Here you choose the phrases you sing, which correlates to the buffs you can cast, which is the most inventive take on the typical bard class I've ever seen in video game format. It's wonderful. From here, the progression system is a pretty standard working your way up the skill tree, but there are so many fun abilities to choose from for each class, and there's just so many fucking classes that you can replay this game a crazy number of times and never repeat the same class choices. Also, the reward for going single class, in my opinion, is well worth it. Some of these high-level abilities truly are game changers, especially for classes like Monk. I think an underrated aspect of progression from Deadfire is quest and conversation progression. I love the variation in ways to approach quests and checks in conversation. Unlike many games, diplomacy checks are not the end-all be-all way of progressing through a conversation. There can be various stat checks, various skill checks, and checks based on previous decisions. Then there are also checks just for flavor, to make you as a player feel more like the character you're role-playing as, like racial checks, class checks, culture checks, background checks, etc. The list goes on. My main point is there's pretty much a skill or dialogue option catered to your specific character that you are trying to roleplay as. You feel like the watcher you've created. I felt like fucking Joe Rogan himself. As far as level curve and progression, I think it's pretty ass and cheeks. I think each level feels impactful and important to unlock, and the curve of power feels right. It's just the combat encounters that feel off. Since there is so much to do in regard to bounties and side quests before you even sniff the main quest line, it is way too easy to become overpowered way too quickly. There are some spots here and there, like the DLC Forgotten Sanctum, which was pretty much made to challenge players who made the same critique, but the curve feels way off. Decently challenging and fun for the first 10 to 15 hours, but then it goes ridiculously easy for the rest, with random outrageous difficulty spikes here and there. Now, you can level curve if that's your thing, but I just hate level curve in principle, so I always turn it off when given the chance, but keep that in mind if you like that sort of thing. Finally, let's end with loot progression. I love the variety and amount of loot, and if anything, I actually think there might be too much, but I'd much rather have too much good loot than not enough, so take that with a grain of salt. The upgrade system is smart and makes sense, and ensures weapons you acquire towards the beginning never really fall off if you want to use them. Level up their tier and unique abilities, and you have a pretty crazy amount of choice and variation to pick from. And what's even better is you have 4 companions with you at all times, who can also use any and all loot. So even if your character is fully kitted out, chances are at least one of your companions can use the new item that you found. I also love the soulbound weapons and armor in concept. Soulbound items become better the more you use them and if you achieve certain milestones, but none really felt like it fit any of my companions' builds, and it's just too late that you get them and require too much investment for what they eventually become. But if given more room to breathe, this could have been a really cool idea. So, what about Avowed? How is Avowed's progression? Well, let's start at the beginning. You visually create your character, choose from 1 of 5 backgrounds, and allocate stats. That's it. Okay, Now I'm being a facetious prick, so let me chill a bit. This game is obviously more focused on a classless freeform system where you are allowed to pick from the wizard tree, ranger tree, and warrior tree with no restrictions, allowing a pretty open and malleable character build, which I don't mind in theory. The only problem is what I joked about a second ago. You pretty much only make one decision during character creator, and that's it. You had so much more leeway to create your character in Deadfire, and it felt very to the person you're roleplaying. In this game, you pretty much choose whether you support Adir or not, and what background you come from, and that's all there is. I felt much less connected to this character despite being able to craft him to look like a much sexier version of myself. Every skill check and dialogue felt like useless flavor text, and worse, it felt like flavor text that didn't even apply to the character I had in mind. Take for example the court augur background that I chose. This is supposed to be some mystic advisor to the emperor, and it started off well enough. By the halfway point, I was just some silly punchline like, "Oh, the envoy and his kooky ways." There are also so many options to use your background, but they just feel completely pointless and lose their appeal really quickly. I did notice much later in the game, towards the last zone to be precise, that skill checks that relied on stats actually did lead to different outcomes in conversations, but this comes really late. And even then, it just doesn't feel that gratifying because I'm not invested in these stories, so I could care less if I save a random NPC or not with a stat check. I think a cool example of this actually working is the fact that you can talk Ludwin into death, which ironically enough I hated, but it's a neat option. Like in theory this is cool, but the entire game has been built up to the showdown with Ludwin, so even though I passed the skill check, I reloaded a save so I could actually compete in the final boss fight. And I like this approach way more. Level ups felt underwhelming. Like they are cool, especially if you're a wizard because you can memorize a spell. But also if you're a wizard, the only way to learn a spell is to have that grimoire equipped that contains a spell. So if you have the grimoire, you don't really get the benefit of unlocking a brand new spell by leveling up, but rather by having the grimoire. The old catch-22, if you will. The skill trees are decent. I can only really speak to magic, but the other ones looked fine enough. My big problem is there just wasn't anything fun to unlock. Like, more powerful spells are fun, but you don't get the benefit of unlocking them yourself. The other abilities you do unlock just make some weapons more viable or increase essence abilities and whatnot. On that note, companions' ability trees are even worse off. There's really no point in going over them in any depth because there is no depth. I think the loot system is okay. It's kind of like a simplified version of Deadfire, but this time you only get one special ability to choose from for uniques rather than multiple, and it only applies to weapons. These abilities seem fun at the beginning, but you come to learn every single one is either elemental damage, or bouncing to nearby enemies, or stagger increases. That's all there really is, with some slight variations. Now, some of the weapon abilities are really cool and neat ideas, like the arquebus that's pretty much a shotgun, or the pistol that pulls an enemy to you so you can hit them in melee. These are neat ideas, but this is like 2 in the entire game. Don't get me wrong though, the weapons are a blast to use and interact with. I just wish there was more variation to choose from. Like, you will essentially get one new weapon per type per zone. That's just how it goes. And if you're focused in on one weapon type with one offhand, you do the math. I think this drip feed would have been fine if all the other loot didn't immediately become useless because of this. There's an easy fix to this. Let companions equip armor and weapons. This would have drastically increased the serotonin release from finding these new special weapons because they can be of more use than just breaking them down for stupid crafting materials. I cannot overstate how much this one small change could have completely upended loot progression and made it so much more fun, but fuck me, I guess. Finally, let's talk about the tiered loot system. It just feels off. One, these rare crafting items are kind of locked behind a natural progression of each zone, so it never felt off, but that's the problem. Why even have this system if it's impossible to over-level weapons because those ingredients aren't available in the specific zone you're in? Why not just do a regular level system? Well, my innocent little guppy, let me answer your question. That's because there would be no reason to explore. Half the locations and zones you explore would be barren if not for these fancy upgrade materials, so I'm torn. Because it does help make exploration not feel totally pointless, but also there has to be a better way to encourage exploration. Like, oh, I don't know, just spitballing here, better side quests and stories? All in all, because of the tier system, progression felt pretty good because it was controlled. I just struggled to justify why this is the system they had to go with to control the level curve. So, who's the big winner on Yeah, it's Deadfire. I don't want to waste my time, it's 100% Deadfire. Here we go, combat time. Comparing these two combat systems is kind of weird because I'm not exactly comparing one system to another, but rather comparing one system to its peers, and then comparing that comparison with one another. Like a simulacrum of each combat system. And for what it's worth, I think Deadfire is the best modernized CRPG combat system. Now, does that mean I think it's the best modern CRPG? No, I think Baldur's Gate 3 has that honor. Is it the best old school CRPG combat system in the modern era? No, I think that would be Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Most importantly, I think it evolved typical real-time with pause combat to the modern era. Abilities and animations are really fun with just enough quality of life improvements to ease the pain of some older jank without simplifying it too far. Like replacing a lot of per rest abilities with per encounter, this just works and makes sense. Let's be honest, you just fucking rested anyway, so why not make this change to per encounter? I think this is genius. Showing where spells will actually hit and what area they will take up seems minute, but after the goddamn Infinity Engine games, this is a godsend. I also like the strategy and just sheer amount of shit to do in combat. Each character has a plethora of options when it comes to abilities, buffs, items, and item abilities that it's staggering. Deadfire also introduced Empowering, which allows you to use a point to empower an attack, making them much more effective or damaging. Little twists on the conventional CRPG combat system like this helps it stand out among the crowd. There's also a fantastic AI behavior editor to make your companions more than fucking donkey wieners in combat. I mean, I had so much fun with combat that I actually sailed the fucking high seas for bounties just to get that sweet, sweet combat, baby. And possibly because my ADHD brain comes buckets at completing tasks. Oh, here, let me make this video a little more enjoyable for my ADHD brethren and sisters. There you go, bro. Don't even worry about it. I think the balance between action-heavy and fun-to-play combat design while balancing intense strategy against tougher opponents serves as a tasty little delicacy for an RPG. Little things like your enemies exploding into blood, slow-mo and final kills, and those squishy, brutal sound effects help add to the intensity of these fights despite the dated format they operate under. Normally I'm a very anti-dungeon sort of dude because RPGs rely way too heavily on them, but this might be the first time I wanted more dungeons to explore because the combat was so engaging and fun to play. This game does a good job at throwing different enemies that do far different things at you for each encounter, leading to combat never feeling stale because there are so many enemy types that do so many different things. I also don't mind only having 4 party members because it feels like this is the perfect number of companions where micromanaging felt relatively manageable unlike other CRPGs. In those, I would often find myself forgetting about 1 or 2 of the companions who just stand around with their thumbs up their fucking asses doing nothing. Also, some of the boss fights were so much fucking fun. The Beast of Winter is amazing in location, design, and challenge. It really is a memorable battle. The giant cave grub in the hidden temple was also an extremely fun fight. And the final boss at Ukaizo was also a really good spectacle of a final challenge with brand new enemy types and approaches. This game also provides quote-unquote super bosses, which are genuinely just fucking impossible without following a specific guide. I tried these fuck faces multiple times and got my ass spanked each and every time. I genuinely think I would have a better shot fighting these nightmares in real life than I did in Deadfire. But if you're into that sort of thing, it's here. On a final note, I need a shout out Forgotten Sanctum. I was flying high, feeling like the big man on campus, steamrolling and ass blasting each and every opponent. And then I reached this DLC, where a little boy was turned into a man. Jesus Christ. Got straight sky dunked on so many times, but it did make beating the final boss all the more sweeter. Also, I love the design of that boss, cute little homage to a D&D beholder, which I thought was just really sick. Now to Avowed. Outside of presentation and exploration, combat is probably the best part of this game, which is super surprising. I say that because while I like Deadfire's combat quite a bit, I don't play Pillars games just for the combat. So for one of Avowed's biggest strengths to be combat is a fun little surprise. Combat encounters felt so intense and so high octane. Dodging and movement are so important, and it helps add to the speed and action of these fights. I was gliding all over the place. I felt like a little water spider. I was straight up noob goofing, wide legs stepping all over the battlefield. This is complemented perfectly with the spells. While not having a crazy variety, the ones they do have are crazy fun, especially with the Grimoire giving access to new spells and increasing the power of previously known spells. The magic system in combat for Avowed might be the best in RPGs, at least for the first-person perspective. The spells feel powerful and impactful. The animation to cast one just makes you feel like a true gray-bearded dork wizard. It's straight perfection. Towards the end, stacking magic spell on magic spell on magic spell just felt like so much fun, and seeing the various interactions with one another and those health bars dissipate was a genuine joy. The best part is finding a new grimoire, learning those spells, and upping the power of various spells and figuring out what works for you and how you play. Due to the open-ended nature, there really is not a set path to follow, and it allows for you to experiment and have fun trying out new spells and new abilities on a whim. This is just the magic too. Weapons can feel just as entertaining. Wands were probably my favorite, with really cool looking flicks of magic missiles and those critical hits with a wand. Arquebuses had fantastic sound design that made every shot feel like a cannon, and lining up a headshot and seeing that yellow damage icon just never got old. Pistols were also a highlight to use, especially in the early game. Pistols akimbo? Take my ready to gold, good narwhal bacon, sir. Two-handed melee weapons felt like they had appropriate weight, and hitting an enemy with a power attack and seeing them ragdoll to the side was a genuine highlight of the year so far for gaming. Combat just has this really nice rhythm and flow to it that feels really addicting to get lost in. My only semi-complaint is encounter design. You see the same healer, wizard, ranger, tank encounter time and time again. It does get pretty old, but bosses, specifically bounties, never got old. They were always really fun and sometimes surprisingly challenging. This combat is not a cakewalk, and you can get fucked up pretty easily on higher difficulties. Also, companions in combat could be hit or miss. There are some that are great, and some that just absolutely melt. Looking at you, Yatsley. I do kind of wish there were more hotkey spells to assign, but that's just because I'm a little slut for this magic system, and I understand it could muck up the screen's UI. I'm just a yearner, I suppose. So, which combat system do I prefer? This is a tough one. Both are incredible in their own ways, and both are accentuated by the fantastic presentation of each game. So, it's a toss-up. I'm gonna sneeze. It's coming on. That was a beta-ass sneeze. Oh my goodness. Deadfire is much more strategic and takes more mental focus. Avowed is a lot more intense and exciting on a moment-to-moment basis. Fuck it. I'm taking the coward's way out. I'll take that fence post and thoroughly jam it up my ass. It's a draw. Dealer's choice, take your pick. I can understand both sides of the argument, but unlike you plebeians, I have transcended above the noise to become the enlightened centrist. Begone, whore. For our final section, we have arrived at the companions. To be frank, the best cast of companions in the series was Pillars of Eternity 1. Such great companions that are still yet to be topped in the series. So this is more so a fight for second. I'm going to go through each companion for each game and rank them in order from worst to best. Let's start with Deadfire. Deadfire's cast is good. I wouldn't say great, but I wouldn't say bad. What is great about the companions is the amount of reactivity they all have throughout the game. It is astonishing how many times they chime in with personal comments that don't just feel like throwaway one-liners, or how many times I took a random companion to a random location and they had a specific dialogue with one of the NPCs. It just shows off the sheer amount of variation the creators accounted for, and it's one of the many reasons Deadfire is fantastic. Enough dilly-dallying, let's rank them. Oh, actually there are these sorts of companions called sidekicks who I won't rank because they don't really have much content. Well, except two of them, which I will rank. Last, we have Edwin. Oh, Jesus. Last, we have Edwin. Why are there so many bullshit-ass fucking dork-ass names in the Pillars universe? Oh my god, dude. Rinagrim, Grambrin, Edwin, Udwuna. Fuck off. God, I'm too dumb to try to say some of these. Last, we have Edwin. I actually kind of love Edwin. So why is she at the bottom? Well, because she's a sidekick. Her hook is great. Animancy vampire, but she just doesn't have enough content to justify putting her any higher. Any background we do get, I love. It's just too little. That's what the fucking fans get for not achieving that highest tier in funding. Next is Votnir. If Votnir got the full companion treatment, he would probably be number one. I love this character archetype. He is essentially a cult leader, preaching the acceptance of death and telling his followers to embrace the cold beyond, just to cower at the thought of death when the town is attacked. I've only ever seen this story beat done once, and it was in the show Midnight Mass, and I loved it then and I love it here. He is a godlike of Rimmergand, the god of entropy and decay, one of my favorite Pillars gods, and he is just so entertaining to listen to. He's a pathetic little worm who seems like a sick joke to Rimmergand. It's brutal. He is great, and I love his priest chanter class quite a bit as well. Top notch, just kind of sectioned off only to be a part of the DLC, so here he lies. Last for the true companions is Aloth. I want to make it clear I don't hate or dislike Aloth, it just kind of feels like we're dragging along a character whose arc is already finished. His entire story in Deadfire is just reflecting on the events of the first game, and he just kind of feels like dead weight in that regard. There are some interesting revelations about the Leaden Key, who he represents, but definitely not interesting enough to place him any higher. The wizard class is a romp, and that aspect I have always liked about him. It's just his character in this one feels lacking. I liked him in 1 too, but oh well, I guess. Next we have Pallegina. Pallegina is a paladin and strong arm of the Valian Trading Company who represents the Republic. I'm kind of torn on Pallegina. I really like her voice acting and unflinching attitude throughout the game. I just feel like there's something missing from her. Her side quest is amazing, revolving around the struggle of being a godlike and the ethics of determining a godlike in the womb, which draws the same moral quandary that the prenatal test for Down syndrome debate revolves around. I just never really was itching to have her in my party. I think the stoicism is maybe too heavy-handed, as she is kind of this serious grumpy person all the time, and while that can be fine, there's just nothing else really for me to grab onto, and that's just why she kind of falls to the side. I don't mind her though, and I think she is a decent companion. Next is Zodi. The first time I played God, I hate these names. Jesus. Next is Zodi. Zodi. Next is Zodi. How the fuck did I say this? The first time I played Deadfire, I absolutely could not stand Exodi at all. I said Exodi. Exodia. It's the fucking Yu-Gi-Oh card. The first time I played Deadfire, I absolutely could not stand her at all. This time I actively came into Deadfire with an open mind, and I enjoyed her much more this go around. Her process of guiding souls with her lantern is a noble endeavor, and she is a good-hearted, likable person. I think her voice acting is one of the major things that dissuaded me. That faux southern accent gets real hard to listen to in my opinion, and for the first half of her story, her entire character revolves around just having a crush on Adair. Cute, but not interesting. Then the reaping of souls in her lantern starts taking a physical and emotional toll on her, and this is where the character kicks into overdrive. You feel bad to see her suffering, but at the same time, there's kind of a good case for her to continue suffering to accomplish her mission. Really muddy morality throughout her questline, and it made me enjoy her character much more. I always play her as a straight priest, but I like the uniqueness of her potential monk/priest multi-class, so keep that in mind. Next is Adair. Look, Adair in the first game was one of the all-time greats, okay? I don't dispute that. Here though, it just once again feels like his story is wrapped up. Deadfire struggles to handle these post-Pillars 1 companions, and it becomes a bit frustrating, but what makes Adair so much better than his previous companions is his relationship to Aethys. Aethys is the main god he worships, so seeing him have to reckon with the death and chaos Aethys is reaping across the nation is devastating. It leads to a crisis of faith from Adair, and the scenes of them communicating together are heartbreaking. I do think this game makes liking animals his entire personality though. It was a cute little cherry on top in the first game, but it pretty much center stage here. Hey, I love animals. Jesus, my biggest co-stars in my YouTube videos are my dipfuck cats, but Adair just takes it way too far. It goes from, yeah, I like dogs, to, may I please pay you 1 Reddit gold for a pet of your doggo, good sir? It gets way too cringe. I feel like Adair also just hardly ever adds anything deep or meaningful to conversations, and he just seems like he's there for the meme of having him there. But he does add occasional bits of wisdom, like with Exodi and with Aethys, and I genuinely liked him. Next is Maya. Maya is a Rauatayan soldier who is placed in your party to spy on you. She is a unique ranger subclass who is genuinely a better pure ranger than you could personally make with your own character, so she's a beast in combat. Maya can be patriotic to a T, but it's not the worst because the game kind of lacks reasonable Rauatayan voices, and she's one of the few who's not totally batshit imperialist. She kind of comes off as extremely harsh to Juana, but it's almost kind of adding to her charm. Aw, my little queen is racist. Her character arc follows the typical soldier questioning their actions, and it's not all the most impressive. But I just really like her dialogue, and getting to partake in the assassinations is brutal, especially because it has a major impact on the endings for those outposts. It's a really cool tie-in to hammer home the dangers of espionage and coups d'etats in a really effective way. Next we have Seraphin. Seraphin is the mandatory pirate companion, but he is without a doubt the funniest companion. Another thing I do like about all of these companions is that there are no laughably evil companions in the group. However, that doesn't make them all goody two-shoes. They all have their own beliefs and allegiances, and these often clash with one another in really interesting ways. Seraphin is a prime example of this. He values freedom but doesn't mind acting in immoral ways, and he just comes off as more human for it. Rarely in life are there quote-unquote evil people. Most of the time they're just ill-intentioned or self-interested. Seraphin's story is a brutal one, and being able to get a sneak peek into Principi culture and seeing Seraphin's outlook on each of the two factions as a quote-unquote neutral pirate party is always great. His Cypher Barbarian class is loads of fun. I just enjoyed seeing him blast through enemies with his little blunderbussies, and he is easily my second favorite. At number 1, we have Takehu. Takehu is a very divisive companion. From everything I see online, I might be the genuine lone Takehu enjoyer. But fuck it, give me a beer and let me die on this hill. Takehu is a Huana godlike, gifted by Andra, goddess of the sea. The Huana have a close tie to the water, and they're water shapers, which are essentially their entire defense against Rauataian naval fleets, and they can devastate entire swaths of ships. Due to these factors, Takehu is revered, but he's kind of a fucking wanker. Most of the time he fucks off from his duties to indulge in debauchery. The best part of Takehu is his intrigue and story. We slowly start hearing whispers from the god Andra herself about Takehu's role in the Huana, and seeing him have to reckon with some of the downright world-shattering revelations revolving around the Huana is devastating. He slowly becomes a more respectful and serious person throughout the game as he grapples with these realities, and seeing the shift throughout the game is wonderful. And that's just his story. His exclusive water-shaping druid subclass is my favorite in the game. It boosts water and ice attacks, and turns off all friendly fire for his druid spells. But the best part is that shark wild shape. Oh, it's fantastic. It's such a unique and fun idea to implement, and it's half the reason I never played druid in Deadfire, despite it being one of my favorite classes. The look and just feel of it is so amazing. I think Takehu is one of the most underrated companions in RPGs, and I love him. Whew, that was a lot of them. But we got one more game's companions to get through. Avowed. Avowed's companions are, well, they're booty cheeks, but I'm getting ahead of myself. One of the positives is their reactivity. Like Deadfire, these motherfuckers are yappers. Always got something to say in a conversation. My only complaint from this is usually they don't really add anything to the conversation, but they sometimes can, and it's still cool to see them react to the world. Also, I find it really funny that they DEI hired all of the races you can't access, like the Dwarf, Amawa, and Orlin, really driving the knife in deep, huh, game? Enough lollygagging, let's start. Last place is Giada. I actually think Giada is one of the more endearing companions in the group, but she has a laughably minuscule amount of content. She's an animancer and her parents died. That's her entire character, and I'm not even joking. You can form a nice friendship with her, but every conversation is about whether or not to give up animancy or about her dead parents. It's like, Jesus, we fucking get it, Bruce Wayne. Instead of focusing on animancy, you need to focus on quitcha. Quitcha bitchin'. Her abilities in combat are invaluable with her healing capabilities. I just struggled to justify bringing her along because she's too milquetoast. Next is Yatzli, our little Orlin freak. I've seen an embarrassing amount of people online self-incriminate themselves by complaining about the lack of romance in this game. Like, really? You're mad you can't pork the sexy gremlin from Gremlins 2 Lost in New York in your video game? that was a little harsh, but still, point stands. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Yatzli. I think Yatzli is the funniest companion in the game. Not that there's stiff competition, but still. From what you can obviously tell from this video, I have the comedic sensibilities of a high schooler, so any mention of genitalia gets a laugh out of this guy. And Yatzli loves talking about genitals. I let out a genuine, God's honest laugh the first time I heard Yatzli exclaim Andra's titties. Definitely lost its appeal after the fucking 90th time, but still, that first one caught me off guard. Like Giada, however, Yatzli just suffers from a lack of content. All of her content is tied to the main story, and even there, it's not much. What is there frustrated the hell out of me. Why is she mad at me about the ruins? She's not an evil companion, so why is she siding with the option that would maybe kill half the population because of the ruins? I get that she is like a scholar of the godless and an archaeologist or whatever, but this game never established she cares more about that stuff than like actual people. It seems super out of character for her to side with Ringrim during this conflict. I also felt dually frustrated that I could not explain why she was wrong because the game didn't give me the option to. It's like you have the audacity to say I have clouded judgment just because I want the hot skeleton lady to stomp on my balls in high heels, yet you want to destroy half the fucking island for some fucking tablets, you stupid dork. Talk about the pot calling the kettle a slur, you furry little bitch. But regardless, I still like Yatsley. It just seemed like she always took the wrong side in disagreements for no good reason. Plus the over-sexualization got a little annoying, but still, I loved her voice acting and personality. I just would have liked a proper story to go along with it. In second place is Marius? Fucking Marius? The fact this dwarven shithead is number 2 should tell you a lot about our sorry state of companions. He is so boring, so bland, so one-dimensional, it's not even funny. His entire personality can be summed up in one word: Ranger. That's it. So how on God's green earth did he get number 2? Well, he is one of the only companions the game remembered to give an actual story to. Even then it almost didn't, snuck a buzzer beater in on the last zone. His background is about being raised in a cult and leaving Solus, the dwarven haven, because of it. It's great, I actually love this story. The only problem is you don't get it until that final stretch of the fucking game. The entire rest of the time, he's genuinely one of the worst companions I've experienced in an RPG. His panic attacks during revisiting the location of the cult served as great characterization, and having to open himself up to this trauma again was a great humanizing moment. It just really sucked that it came so fucking late and took so fucking long. The rest of this game, his personality is so dog shit, but he at least has characterization and content, so I gotta give him the mandatory second, despite not liking him for a vast majority of my playthrough. And in first place by a country fucking mile is Kai. Kai genuinely seems like the only companion this game actually cares about. Let's get it out of the way. Yes, he has the same voice actor as Garrus, but after the first couple of lines, I genuinely stopped noticing. He is a genuine person who has his own beliefs and convictions, which he stands by, but also is willing to listen to reason. His background with Tama, which is drip-fed to the player, is phenomenal. My only slight complaint is being how long he edges you about it. Like, let me goon, brother. Open up to me, you know what I'm saying? My favorite aspect about him eventually opening up to you is its approach in doing so. It's not the typical, I don't like you or I won't talk to you, then randomly unleashing paragraphs of dialogue on the player. He is always warm and friendly, but he has his own personal secrets. It never affects his personality, and it feels so much more rewarding when he finally does open up, because it feels like a genuine friendship has formed. He is such a great character, and his lines in conversation feel like they're expanding dialogue, and he usually has something interesting to say about your circumstances. I love Kai, and I think he could stand toe-to-toe with a lot of other Pillars companions. It's just a damn shame he is the only one. If we would have had 4 Kais, I would be singing a far different tune, but alas, here we are. So, which game has the better companions? It's easily Deadfire, enough said. Here we are, at the end. The final conclusion. So, Avowed. Is it better than Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire? I think if any of you have even been half paying attention to this video, then the question has already been answered. But I do want to elaborate a little bit before I state the obvious. These are 2 different games aiming to accomplish 2 vastly different goals. Which goal most resonates with you is going to vary person to person. Let's start with Deadfire. In terms of what I play RPGs for, Deadfire delivers and then some. Morally ambiguous quest lines, interesting characters, choice and consequence, fantastic loot, and an intricate strategic combat system. My only complaint is that maybe the companions could have been a little stronger, but at this point, I'm more so looking for aspects to critique. I'm going to give Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire an S-. Now for Avowed. What to say about Avowed? The Pillars DNA is present in this game. It just is DNA that has been watered down and has a bit of piss and Gatorade in it. I saw someone online refer to this as an RPG set to arcade mode, and I could not have said it better myself. That's just too perfect of a description for this game. I do want to emphasize that this is a fun, enjoyable game that you won't regret playing. That being said, you also probably won't remember playing this game years down the line. It's just a bit of mindless fun if you go in with those expectations. I'm gonna give Avowed a C+. So, Avowed. Is it better than Deadfire? No. But it is still a fun game. That'll about do it. For the tier list, I would slide Deadfire at the bottom of the S- tier. I contemplated ranking it above Dark Souls, but I think Dark Souls ekes it out. For Avowed, it's my first C+, so that will obviously put it at the top of C tier. Give you a chance to look over this bad boy. Hope you like what you see. Don't even worry about KOTOR and B-. Anywho, we've come to the end. Thank you so much for listening to me bitch and moan about Avowed while I fully throatily sucked off Deadfire. I really do appreciate it. For my next video, I'll give you a little meme to let you know what's coming up next. Hope you stick around and stay tuned, and for now, I don't have a signing off message, so fuck off, I guess.